The lawyer slowly unfolded the final page of Richard Ashford's will. The entire family leaned forward. Emily smiled confidently. Charles had already started planning which luxury car he would buy. Victoria quietly wiped away fake tears. Then, the lawyer spoke. "I leave Ashford Manor, all of my businesses, every investment, and my entire fortune, to my gardener, Samuel Reed." Silence. Nobody breathed. Then Emily jumped to her feet. "This has to be a joke." Charles grabbed the will. "You switched the papers." Victoria didn't say a word. She simply stared at Samuel, almost as if she already knew this would happen. The lawyer raised his hand. "There is one final instruction. If anyone attempts to sell Ashford Manor before completing Richard Ashford's final challenge, the entire inheritance will be donated to charity." The room exploded. "What challenge?" The lawyer unfolded another envelope. He frowned. "I wasn't expecting this." Inside, there is only one sentence. "The inheritance isn't inside the mansion. It's hidden beneath the place everyone fears." Nobody understood, except the old housekeeper. She quietly dropped the tray she was holding. The sound echoed through the courtroom. Her face turned completely pale. She whispered only 3 words. "Not again." Then she walked out. Samuel had worked at Ashford Manor for 23 years. He knew every tree, every flower, every pathway, but he'd never seen the housekeeper frightened, especially Margaret. She had lived in the mansion longer than anyone. If she looked terrified, something was terribly wrong. Samuel followed her outside. "Margaret." She kept walking. Rain had started falling. She finally stopped beside the enormous iron gates. "Leave." Samuel frowned. "What?" "Take the money, leave the mansion, and never come back." Samuel looked confused. "You know something?" Margaret slowly looked toward the mansion. "I've buried too many secrets already." She climbed in her car and drove away. Samuel stood alone, watching the mansion through the rain. For the first time, it didn't feel like the beautiful place he'd cared for all these years. It felt alive. That evening, Samuel moved into Richard's old office. The lawyer insisted the mansion legally belonged to him now. Every hallway felt strangely silent. The grandfather clock struck midnight. Then, the electricity suddenly failed. Darkness. Complete silence. Seconds later, emergency lights turned on. Everything glowed deep red. Samuel reached for his flashlight. Something caught his eye. At the far end of the hallway, one door was slowly closing by itself. He ran. By the time he reached it, the hallway was empty. The room inside was Richard's private study. Untouched, a warm fire still burned in the fireplace. Impossible. No one had entered this room since Richard's funeral. Samuel searched the room carefully. Nothing. Then, tick, tick, tick. A strange sound came from inside the wall. Not a clock. Something mechanical. He followed the sound. It stopped behind Richard's enormous bookshelf. Samuel pushed against it. Nothing. He searched every shelf. One old gardening book looked strangely clean. He pulled it. Click. The bookshelf moved. A hidden staircase slowly appeared. Cold air drifted upward. Samuel aimed his flashlight into the darkness. Stone steps disappeared far beneath the mansion. Someone had built an underground passage. On the first step lay a brand new lantern. It wasn't dusty. Someone had been down there very recently. Then, Samuel heard footsteps. Not below him. Behind him. He turned. Emily stood at the entrance, holding a revolver. Her eyes never left the staircase. She smiled. "I was hoping you'd find it first." Then she quietly locked the study door. From the inside, Emily slowly lowered the revolver. But she never stopped smiling. Samuel looked from the gun to the hidden staircase. "What do you want?" Emily laughed. "You still don't understand. I don't care about Father's money." She stepped closer. "I care about what he hid." Samuel frowned. "You already knew this staircase existed." Emily didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her pocket and threw something onto the floor. A small silver key. "I've been looking for that passage for 15 years. Samuel looked confused. "Then why didn't you open it?" Emily's smile disappeared. "Because the passage only opens when someone Richard truly trusted pulls the book." Silence. Samuel suddenly understood. Richard had planned this. Every step, every clue, every choice. Long before he died. Emily pointed toward the staircase. Go first. Samuel didn't move. What if I don't? Emily quietly pulled back the hammer. I'll find another way. Samuel picked up the lantern. The stone steps disappeared deep underground. Each step echoed through the darkness. The air became colder. The smell changed. Old wood, dust, and something metallic, almost like old coins. Or blood. 30 steps later, the staircase ended. Samuel raised the lantern. His eyes widened. An underground railway platform, hidden beneath the mansion. A full-sized railway track disappeared into complete darkness. An ancient steam cart sat quietly beside the platform. Emily whispered, "What is this place?" Samuel noticed something carved into the wall. Ashford Estate, 1893. Then, the lantern flickered. Footsteps echoed somewhere down the tunnel. Not one person. Several. Emily immediately aimed her flashlight. Who's there? No answer. Only footsteps. Getting closer. Samuel grabbed an old iron bar from the floor. The footsteps suddenly stopped. Silence. Complete silence. Then, a loud whistle echoed through the tunnel. An old train whistle. The abandoned cart began rolling by itself. Slowly, without anyone touching it. Emily stepped backwards. That's impossible. Samuel noticed something. The cart wasn't moving by itself. A cable beneath the tracks was pulling it. Someone was controlling it. The cart stopped directly in front of them. On the seat lay a leather journal. Nothing else. Samuel carefully picked it up. Richard Ashford's handwriting covered the first page. If you've reached this tunnel, someone has already betrayed you. Samuel looked at Emily. She looked back at him. Neither of them spoke. Richard continued. The person standing beside you is not your enemy. Samuel frowned. Then who was? He turned the page. Every remaining page had been torn out, except the last. Trust no one above ground. Emily slowly whispered. Above ground. What does that mean? Before Samuel could answer, another sound echoed behind them. A metal gate slammed shut. The staircase was gone. They were trapped. Emily rushed toward the wall. There has to be another exit. Samuel searched the tunnel. Then he noticed something strange. Fresh boot prints. Someone had walked here only minutes earlier. Impossible. Richard had died 4 days ago. Who was down here? The boot prints led deeper into the tunnel. Suddenly, they heard a man's voice. Calm, confident, almost familiar. You finally made it. Samuel's heart nearly stopped. He knew that voice. It couldn't be. Richard Ashford was dead, wasn't he? Samuel's heart pounded. The voice echoed through the tunnel. You finally found it. It wasn't Richard. An old man slowly stepped into the lantern light. Gray hair, work boots, dirty hands. Samuel immediately recognized him. Thomas, the mansion's former groundskeeper. Everyone believed he had disappeared 15 years earlier. Emily lowered her gun. You're alive. Thomas smiled sadly. I've been waiting for someone Richard actually trusted. Samuel frowned. My entire life. I thought you quit. Thomas shook his head. I wasn't allowed to leave. He pointed toward the tunnel walls. Richard built this place after discovering his own children were stealing from the people who trusted him. Samuel looked confused. What people? Thomas handed him a dusty wooden box. Inside were hundreds of letters. Each one came from former employees, gardeners, drivers, housekeepers, secretaries, families who had spent their lives helping build Richard's company. Every letter told the same story. They had been cheated. Their pensions disappeared. Their homes were taken. Someone inside the company had been quietly changing documents for years. Samuel looked toward Emily. You knew. Emily slowly nodded. I knew something was wrong, but I thought Father was responsible. Thomas opened one final folder. Every forged signature belonged to Charles, Richard's youngest son. Samuel couldn't believe it. Charles hadn't inherited nothing. Because Richard hated him, he inherited nothing. Because Richard had spent the last 10 years secretly collecting evidence against him. The mansion, the inheritance, the hidden tunnel, none of it was about money. Richard wanted one honest person to decide what happened next. Samuel quietly sat down. If I give this to the police, the Ashford name is finished. Thomas nodded. If you destroy it, hundreds of innocent families never get justice. Samuel closed his eyes. Richard hadn't left him wealth. He had left him a choice, the hardest inheritance of all. The next morning, every television station carried the same breaking news. Ashford Global was under criminal investigation. Dozens of former employees finally received compensation. Charles disappeared before police arrived. He was arrested 2 weeks later while trying to leave the country. Emily stood outside the courthouse. She didn't speak. She simply thanked Samuel. You gave this family the one thing money never could. The truth. Months later, Ashford Manor reopened, not as a private mansion, not as a luxury hotel, but as a museum dedicated to every employee who had helped build the Ashford legacy. Samuel still worked there, not as the owner, as the caretaker, exactly where he felt he belonged. Every morning, he watered the same garden Richard had loved. One afternoon, a little boy asked him, "Did you really inherit this whole place?" Samuel smiled. "No, I inherited something much more valuable." The boy looked confused. "What?" Samuel looked toward the mansion. "The chance to do the right thing. Sometimes, the greatest inheritance isn't what someone leaves behind. It's the decision they trust you to make."